I'm a community organizer in the United States. Most community organizers are secular, so they work in neighborhoods or housing units or schools or civic associations. I do a very specialized form of community organizing that's called faith-based community organizing. And I'll talk to you in a moment about that, but I just thought I'd give you a little bit of my own background so that you can understand my motivation for why I do religious, faith-based community organizing. So I grew up religious, although I didn't really like the church that I grew up in. So when I went to college, my parents kind of made me go to church until I was 18. And then when I got to college, they said you could do whatever you want. So I immediately started taking classes in like Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, because I just wanted to, I still felt this like drive to understand sort of the existential questions in life, but I really did not like being Christian. So I went as far away as I could from Christianity. And the irony of that is the more I sort of studied other religions, the more I missed engaging in religious life with other people. So my religion classes in college really stimulated my mind, but there was like a piece missing, right? And the piece that was missing was like community, human interaction of religion, right? Not just like how it works when we think about it or how it looks in books, but like how you experience God when you have a conversation with another person, or when you pray with another person, or when you fight with another person. So that inspired me to become a religion major in college, and I did an honors thesis, and my teachers said, hey, you're pretty good at this. Do you think you want to go to grad school? So then I went to Harvard University for grad school, and I have a master's, what's called a master's in divinity from Harvard. What a master's in divinity is it's partially an academic master's, but more than anything, it's a 3-year program that teaches you how to work in a religious context. So you learn academic stuff about religion, but you also learn like counseling, pastoral counseling practices, how to run a church service if you're going to be a pastor, how to work in faith-based institutions. And so now that I've graduated 5 years ago, I've been working in religious groups ever since. So that is a bit of my background, a bit of my own faith story. So I'm going to talk to you about faith-based organizing today, but I wanted to begin just kind of understanding sort of what your thoughts are about religion. So I wanted to ask you, what do you all think is the purpose of religion, or some of the purposes of religion in society? Why did humans invent religion, or why do humans practice religion, or why are they inspired by religion? What purpose does it serve in society? There are lots of answers, and there are lots of you, so many of you can answer. What's the purpose of religion?
Well, I think that it's to keep the people morally good.
Morally what?
Good.
Oh, yeah, okay, so there's, so morality, that's good. Good. What else? Yeah?
To explain what they couldn't understand at first, when, for example, in the ancient times, the gods were there to explain, but the people didn't understand, for example, the storm.
Yeah, so right, so like sometimes we call that an etiology, right? Or sort of the explanation of something, right? Like why? Is that right? No either. Great. All right, what else? What other purpose does religion serve in life? Just morality and explaining how things came to be? That's it? Are any of you religious? Can I ask that? Raise your hand if you're religious. We only have secular people in the room? Two religious. So what role does religion play in your life?
Connection with God.
Connection with God. Okay, good. I'm glad to know there are a bunch of skeptics in the room. Okay, and what else?
Hope that life doesn't end after life.
Yeah, okay, good. So hope not only for life, but after life, right? Good. What else? Any other purpose to religion? Yeah.
Believing something make life easier, like to keep on and something like that.
Right, meaning, right? It gives life meaning, religion. Yeah. So, I had this horrible book I had to read in divinity school called Meaning Making. But that's like a phrase that you just made me think of, actually, that not in a horrible way, in a good way, but yeah, that religion helps us construct meaning, right? Right, good. Hi, come on in. So the question is, what's the purpose of religion in life? Do any of the three new of you want to answer? What's the purpose of religion?
To control people.
Control people? All right, good. All right, I was hoping someone would be honest and brave and skeptical. Okay, any more?
Organize the society.
Oh, God. Yeah, good. 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 All right, any more wild answers out there? Or is this a pretty good list? Are you happy with this list? All right, okay, this is okay, these are the purposes of religion, right? Okay. I can work with this list. Okay, yeah.
For create the connection everybody.
Creating a connection what? Between people?
Between
Okay, good. All right. All right. Any last answers? These are all the purposes of religion. Yeah. Okay, we can work with this list. All right. The reason I wanted to talk to you about the purpose of religion is because I actually firmly believe that one of the major purposes of religion is to organize us, actually, is to force us to organize. And that's what I do. Well, it's supposed to be 5 days a week, but it ends up being more like 6 days a week in my job. And a lot of people in America actually resist religious organizing because they think that politics should not play a role in religion, and religion should not play a role in politics. And a lot of what community organizing is political, right? But what I think community organizing is in a faith-based way is it forces us to reckon with our own morality and how that plays out in everyday life, right? We don't talk about an etiology or an explanation as much, but we do reckon with sort of like when we're organizing, we actually talk about sort of like, is this part of God's ministry for us? Like, are we following God's will? So a little bit in that. It definitely brings us into a connection with God when we organize, and I'll talk a little bit about this. We have to, we're conscientiously always thinking about our next steps, and we're, yeah, come on in.
I couldn't find the
That's okay. Welcome. We're always thinking, when we're on a mission, when we're working on a campaign, are we connecting with God, or are we just following, are we building power because we want power, or are we building power because we want God to have power in the world? Certainly it gives us a hope for life. I'm not sure if we talk about afterlife really when we organize. It certainly gives us meaning for me when I organize. The reason I organize, I could be doing any number of jobs, but for me it gives me meaning in my life. I really feel called, almost like I feel called into the ministry of organizing, right? That might sound a little funny to you all, but that's the truth. Control people. Yes, we actually do this too. If you think about controlling people as a neutral sort of phrase instead of negative, how I imagine you mean it, maybe I'm making an assumption, yeah. We actually try and control people when we're organizing through religious means, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We're trying to organize society. This is very close to like what we're actually specifically trying to do every day, but not in a not in a fascist sort of way. in a very democratic kind of way. And this is huge, connections between people. We sort of say there are three important things that make up organizing, and connecting people, building relationships with people is one, and actually it's the foundation of our work. So I wanted to sort of almost make a proof for you at the beginning about why organizing needs to happen in religious groups and faith-based groups, because in America I get a lot of pushback on that. So I just wanted to start out the lecture sort of proving, maybe it's a little defensive, but proving that it should be done in faith-based groups. So now I'm going to give you sort of a theoretical definition, a very abstract definition of what community organizing is. So community organizing is when you bring a group of people together who have shared values and shared concerns about the world to build power in numbers and to assert that power through our shared values on society. Okay. Do you want me to repeat that again? Yes. Yeah, okay. So community organizing is when you collect a group of people together who have shared values and shared life concerns. To build power through numbers. And then to assert that power onto society. And when I say society, I typically mean one of two things. Usually our targets, our societal targets are either private, meaning oftentimes it's private business, or the government. So what does that look like, right? It's easiest for me to sort of tell you a story about a campaign that we did. My group that I work with that has hired me is an NGO in the United States that operates in both New Hampshire and Vermont. It's a collection of 13 faith groups who got really pissed off and tired and angry when they were doing charity work and they were doing charity work and they were doing charity work, and they kept doing charity work, because God calls you to do charity work when you're religious, and they could never do enough charity work. They always had more poor people, they always had people asking for money, they always had people asking for food, they always had people asking for homes, and that made them angry. Why do you think they got angry? Yeah. Yeah, there's no end. Right. So what do you do if you are in this position where you have to provide, you're called to provide charity for the, in biblical terms, we usually say the widow and the orphan, right? I mean, that's actually metaphorical to meaning people on the margins, right? If you feel commanded to provide help to people on the margins and you can never do enough, what do you do? How do you react? What do you do? What would you do?
I have no idea.
Yeah. If you volunteered 5 hours a week at a homeless shelter and the same people kept coming in night after night, year after year, what would you do?
Keep helping them?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Maybe increase your hours or yeah. All right. Does anybody have a reaction? What would you do? If you donated food all the time, yeah.
Well, I would stop doing it.
You'd stop doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you'd be frustrated and hopeless. Yeah. So this is really common in charity work. What my group did is they got really angry, and they didn't want to stop because they knew stopping meant actually more people who, but they decided that rather than putting a Band-Aid on the wound, they needed to cure the illness. Okay? What they decided was there was some systemic cause for homelessness, there was some systemic cause for poverty, there was some systemic cause for hunger, there was some systemic cause for economic injustice, and maybe a more efficient way of trying to solve those problems isn't just giving money out, giving food out, building more homes, but going to the root cause of some of these problems and trying to cure things from the root cause. Do you know what I'm saying when I say root cause? All right. So that's what these groups have decided to do. They have decided to join together and create a new NGO, 13 of them, hire someone, a professional, me, to work with all of the volunteers in their parishes and their congregations to work on curing the systemic cause of poverty and suffering in the area. Okay? Can you think of any place or any situation where have you seen that happening in Hungary or in your home countries before? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Can you tell me an example?
There are several organizations, I don't know any faith-based, but there are Lions and Rotary and Leo and these organizations that are...
So what do they do?
doing a good job in Hungary.
Yeah, so what do they do?
They're building homes for people who don't have not only poverty, but they're building homes for mothers so that they can be with their ill children, which wouldn't be allowed in normal hospitals. They collect money that they can change for food and stuff.
Good.
So on. I don't know.
Good. No, thank you. Does anybody else have an example from a place where they are from? Do they know that people are working on systemic change? No? Are you just a shy group? Am I asking boring questions?
These organizations did the same thing in Turkey too.
In Turkey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how are they working on it in Turkey?
In the same way.
Yeah.
The same organizations with the same ways.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Can you think of any national leaders, whether they're from your country or from world history, who have done work like this? Many of them are religious. Many of them I know you know their names. Can you think of any? No. Okay. Let's try this one. Do you know who he is?
Of course.
Yeah? He's a community organizer. He was a faith-based community organizer. Actually, there was someone else helping him. He was kind of a spokesperson. E.D. Nixon helped him organize the Montgomery bus boycott. That's faith-based community organizing, okay? That's what it looks like. You know him? Yeah, okay. What about this? You know him?
Yes.
Do you know? Oh, no, I saw no. Malcolm X. In America, they like to say these two fought during the civil rights movement, but actually Malcolm X, Martin Luther King had some different philosophies about how to raise up African Americans in the United States. But he did organizing in New York and Philadelphia, in Boston, in Chicago, and Detroit, where he got black people together to actually almost boycott white businesses and begin to build up their own businesses so that black people shopped at black businesses and built up the economic standing of black communities, right? Actually began to build a black middle class in the United States, which in the 50s and 60s was radical because in the 50s and 60s, well, and before that, black people and white people were completely segregated, right? Couldn't use the same bathroom, didn't go to the same school, couldn't use the same buses, right? Couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. And this is powerful work. All right, so they're community organizers. These are my heroes. This is what I'm trying to be in my own little part of the world. Yep, so I'm gonna tell you, I thought maybe I would tell you a quick story about, from one of my campaigns, and then I wanted to sort of talk about something we talk about in organizing called self-interest. And then I wanted to hear sort of your reaction on it, because maybe you're just absorbing this and this all sounds very logical, in which case I'm doing my job sort of explaining this in a very rational way. But the reality is I get a lot of pushback from parishioners about whether we should be doing this work in churches. Okay. So just to give you a sample, just to give you a little photograph, sort of like what I do, what it looks like, what my organization looks like. I'll tell you a story of a campaign that started in 2011, 2 months after I arrived on the job. In August, at the end of August, a huge hurricane hit our area. We're not along the ocean. Oh, I shouldn't have erased my map. We're not along the ocean, but the hurricane was going up the East Coast and took like a really random left turn inland, and no one expected it, and it dropped a ton of rain on the 2 states that I organize in. And the 2 states I organize in are pretty mountainous, right? So when tons of water drops onto those states, all the water flows into the rivers, all the rivers flow into other rivers, and there's one main river that actually divides the states, a river like this, and I work in towns that dot the river like this, right? So all this water poured into what's called the Connecticut River, and all these towns along the river flooded, okay? There's one town, and I don't have a good example, but I guess maybe kind of like, it's not nearly as big as Szeged, but kind of like the hub right here, where there are big stores and stuff, completely flooded. I mean, it was right along the river. Actually, it was on this side. Actually, I should have drawn it here. That's where it is, right? That's where all our stores are. Like if you want to go buy curtains for your house, you go to West Lebanon, right? And you go buy curtains for your house. If you want to go grocery shopping, you drive from one of these little towns into West Lebanon and you go grocery shopping. I cannot stress to you how much this is like the commercial center of our community. And this whole area flooded. And there was one big store there called JCPenney's that flooded. Have any of you ever heard of JCPenney's? Okay, it's like a big department store, right? It carries everything. In America, we are not smart, and we like to have stores that carry everything rather than like a million cute little shops that have a million cute little things. JCPenney's carries like all your house stuff, all your clothes, all your kitchen stuff, all your bathroom stuff, right? So if you needed to buy anything for your house or for your kids or shoes, you go to JCPenney. It completely flooded. And for the first 3 days, JCPenney, which is a national chain, had a hotline open for its employees. So if the employees needed to call in and ask questions about employment, so like, am I fired? Are you opening the store again? When do I get to go back to work? Can I apply for unemployment benefits? They could call in. But you know, a lot of the employees were actually suffering because their houses had flooded too. So calling JCPenney was like kind of at the bottom of their list. It was more sort of like, can I salvage anything from my home? You know what I mean? Like, are my wedding pictures ruined? Do I own any furniture? Where are all my legal documents, right? That was sort of the priority. Where am I going to live for the next year, right? So after 3 days, JCPenney's shut down the hotline, right? So the employees had no way of getting information. There were about 100 employees, 90 of them were women, okay? What happened next was, after about a month, I had a conversation with a woman named Sally McFarland. Sally McFarland goes to one of the churches that I organize in. She goes to St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which actually is right where I raced. She goes to church right there. And I was talking to Sally one day, and I was saying, so, you know, what's JCPenney's plan? Are you going to go back to work soon, or are they going to rebuild the building? And she said, I have no clue. And I was like, what do you mean you have no clue? Like, they must have sent you like a letter. And she's like, no, I've been out of work for a month. I've tried to apply for unemployment benefits. Do you guys know what unemployment benefits are? Okay, you have that the same here. Okay. And they said I can't, but I can't make any money, and I can't apply to jobs. So like, I have no income. I haven't had income for a month, and I don't know how long this is gonna go on not having income for. I don't know if I have to quit my job so I can apply for another job. And if I do have to quit my job, I don't know who to call to say I quit, right? So I was like, Sally, that sucks. Like, what are you gonna do, right? Like, I was like, well, what do the other women say? And she's like, they said the same thing. They don't know what's going on. So Sally and I talked about it, and I talked to my organization about it, and I said, this just doesn't sound right to me, right? This is like where morality comes in. This doesn't seem like we're dignifying workers and their ability to make it, to make an income, a livelihood for their family, right? So the organization said, I think Sally and the workers need to fight JCPenney, and we're going to back them, right? So now we're talking about connections between people, right? This is actually a very holy religious activity, right? We're going to back the workers. The churches are going to back the workers. How are we going to do that? Well, we happen to know one of the politicians in our area. The reason we know her is because this is where controlling people comes in. We know her because her mom goes to church with Sally, right? So we know if we call the politician, she's going to pick up the phone because Sally's going to call and say, I'm Sally, I go to church with your mom. And if she doesn't pick up the phone, her mom is going to tell her to pick up the phone because she's going to say, I go to church with Sally, pick up the phone, right? Pick up the phone. So we called a meeting with one of the politicians and we said, look, these women have no hope for their life. They're not making any money. They haven't made money for a month. They don't know how long this not making money is going to go on for. Can you help us? What can you do? We have these questions about unemployment, and we have these questions about when the store is going to be reopened. And she said, yes, I can help you. This is where the organizing society begins to come in, right? So we're saying, this is not fair. We want to organize society so it is fair, right? We want to impose our morality on the behavior of JCPenney and the behavior of our local government. Right. So this woman, this politician, called a meeting with a bigger politician whose job is to understand jobs in the state of New Hampshire. So we got a meeting with him, and the way we do meetings, again, because a big piece of our work is connections between people, because religion tells us that connections between people is holy, right, and powerful, is we held a meeting with this big politician, but we didn't just have a meeting with the big politician and Sally. We didn't just have a meeting between the big politician and the little politician and Sally. We pulled together 30 workers. We pulled together 10 more church people and had a meeting with the big politician and the little politician because, like I said in organizing, we use the power of numbers to impress our values upon society, right? It looks more powerful. If I'm walking in this room, it looks more powerful if I see all of you together and know that all of you want the same thing than if I just sit down with Gabor, right? It looks more powerful, right? I'm more scared as a politician if I see all of you than just Gabor, no offense. But all of you are more intimidating than just one person. So we had a meeting and we said, figure out the unemployment problem. Figure it out. That's your job. We're telling you the problem. Figure it out. We had women individually stand up and tell their story about how much they loved working for JCPenney, how they'd worked there for 20 years, and how they didn't feel like they should be treated this way after 20 years of work, right? So what happened on that problem is the big politician called JCPenney's. So all these little women had been calling JCPenney's, and they would never pick up the phone. But when the big politician called JCPenney's, what do you think happened? You think they offered a different response than just some little worker? Yeah, they did. They said they can apply for unemployment benefits, they can apply for jobs in the interim without losing their job, okay? That is a really big deal, all right? Think about not working for a month, not knowing when you can work again, and having your employer say, you can't work until I tell you to work, and I don't know when that's going to be, right? Now, because we got the big politician involved, he said, you can work until we want you to come back to work. So that's one way in that situation. We engage the purpose of, some of the purposes of religion. Morality, hope for life. We did some meaning right there, right? Like the meaning of life. Like the people who were just church people, they were saying this is a way we can help other people without just shelling out money for Sally to live every single day. They were saying it's actually JCPenney's responsibility. So, we're going to do something a little bit bigger than that. We began to control people, right? We're controlling the little politician and the big politician, and essentially JCPenney's. We're controlling them through power. And we're beginning to organize society, right? We're beginning to take the private business and tell them how we want them to behave, right? Basing according to our own morality. And of course, there's connections with people. The second problem we had, and I'll try and wrap this up quickly, is the second problem we had is even though the JCPenney said, yeah, you can apply for unemployment benefits and you can look for another job, they didn't say whether the store would ever reopen. Remember, it was flooded. They didn't say if it was going to reopen, where it was going to reopen. They didn't say when it was going to reopen. And they didn't actually ever say, yeah, we'll rehire the workers. So we were worried that the workers who did go out and get a second job would be fired when the store would, reopened, if it ever would, right? So we started another campaign. We had all the women call their boss. No response. We had all the women call their boss's boss. No response. We had all the women call their boss's boss's boss, right? Still no response. So we knew then that we had to get a little bit more serious, right? So we had about 25 women calling. We realized that 25 was not the magic number for JCPenney, right? It needed to be more. We needed to build more people who had the same interest to come together to impress, again, our values on this company. So what we did is we talked to all the congregations about it, right? We used our religious language, we used our morality, and we said to the churches, this is what's happening, what do you think? And all of them said, this is horrible. Now we're talking about hundreds of people. So what we did is we wrote a little letter. It was a very friendly letter, right? And this is being strategic. We wrote a very friendly letter saying, Dear JCPenney, you're such an important store to our community. We love you very much. The workers love you very much. They love you so much they want to come back and work for you. The problem is you haven't told them that they can come back and work for you. You also haven't told them when they can come back and work for you. You also haven't told them where they can come back and work for you. Furthermore, the community doesn't know if you're going to reopen. You're very important to us. Please let us know. Love, Happy Church people, right? We had people sign the letters individually, and then we also gave them space to, again, express themselves, right? Their own sense of morality, their own sense of hope, their own sort of like meaning around this in a note at the bottom. And the notes at the bottom really varied. Some of them were like, I'm really pissed off that you're treating these workers so bad. They're my neighbors. Get with it. And some of them were like, I'm really disappointed in you. They like turn the guilt on, which is another aspect of religion, right? All in all, we sent over 450 letters into the headquarters of JCPenney's in a big box. We sent them all down to Texas. And we also called the newspaper and said, this is what we're doing, right? We got this great newspaper article written about us. And what do you think happened when we sent 450 letters to the store headquarters? Does anybody have a guess? Did anybody think that 450 was the magic number? No, you don't think so?
Yeah, it's a lot of months, no response. Yes.
Turns out 450 was the magic number. We were lucky, I mean, we realized this. We were very lucky. We could have had to do it again, right, where we would have had to send like 2,000 letters, but it turned out 450 was enough. And they actually never responded to us, but within 1 week of getting the letters, after 6 months of this nonsense, right, coincidentally, and I don't think that's why this is in quotes, they called their first employee meeting, where guess what they said? They said, we are reopening. That was the first question we asked them to answer. We are reopening in the same location. That was the second question we asked them to answer. We are opening on May 1st, which was the third question we asked them to answer. And we will rehire all the workers, which is the fourth thing we asked them to answer. Right? So that is what community organizing is in a faith-based context. It's utilizing the moral authority and the moral values of people of faith to assert those moral values and those shared values and those shared concerns about the community upon society. Not in a nasty way, not in a way that's trying to brainwash people, but in a way that's trying to organize society in a way that creates more equity, right? Before I move on, are there any questions about that? Do you have any comments about that? Do you think that was a good thing? Are you cynical about the story I just told you? I mean, I just told it in a really positive way because I think it's a good thing, but I'm eager to hear your perspectives. No thoughts? No. Are any of you impressed? Like, are any of you like, wow, that's really cool? Yeah, I got one thumbs up? Okay. No? Is this just like a really boring thing? You think this just should happen every day and then it's easy? No? No. You think it takes a lot of work? Yeah. All right. Does anybody think this is exciting? Yeah. Yeah. Can anybody envision this happening in their own community? Do any of you think it's scary that churches have power to organize society in this way? I mean, for those of you who aren't religious, who are skeptical of religion, is this like a scary thing for you? You can be honest. I'm not going to be offended. I think you think it. You're a little skeptical. You're not skeptical? Okay. No comments. What are you saying?
No, it's not scary, but I think it's not compulsory to do it in a religious way. You can do it even if you're not religious.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, so, again, the majority of the times this kind of stuff happens in America, it's in a secular way. It is in a secular way. I've chosen to do it in a faith-based way because I think religion is powerful. I also think in religion we have kind of like a little bit of an edge over the secular crowd because even though religion is sort of dying in America, the institution of religion and churches are dying in America, it's still a really big deal if you walk up to if a priest walks up to a politician and says, what you're doing is sinful. Even if he is not religious, there is a lot of symbolism that carries weight there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think we have a little bit of an edge. That being said, there's stuff that we can't work on, right? There's stuff like abortion that divides our church. We can't work, we just decide not to work on that stuff. Or LGBT issues, we can't work on that stuff because we can't all agree. People still work on that in their own religious communities, but we can't work on it together. Yeah. Any other reactions to the story I told? No. Okay. I will move on. I just wanted to talk, introduce you to one more term that's really important in religious organizing that, it's really important in organizing, but it's a topic that actually is really, it's a key principle of organizing that's actually, how am I going to say this? It's really hard for religious people to understand, okay? And I thought I would bring this up to you because you're thinking about religion, you're in here to think about global religion, and this has been something that I think, actually makes religion makes this topic in organizing weak for religious people. This is a weakness religious people have. And it deals with selfishness and selflessness. So I'll introduce the topic in a moment, but first I wanted to talk about selfishness and selflessness. Can someone tell me what selfishness means? What does it mean to be selfish?
To only care about ourselves.
Yeah, only about the self, right? And where do you find selfishness, the topic of selfishness, coming up in religion? Do you think this is a theme in religion anywhere? Oh, come on.
In some radical groups.
In radical groups? So in what way?
I don't know, some fundamentalistic.
Fundamentalists?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what do they talk about when they talk about selfishness?
They're just talking about their self. I don't know, how can I explain it? But
Okay.
they're not looking to others.
Yeah, okay. How about this? I'll try it this way. Have you ever heard of like the concept of like Catholic guilt? Catholic guilt? No? Okay, have you ever heard the term of like Jewish guilt? You haven't like watched Seinfeld, where like Seinfeld's Jewish mother is always like making him feel guilty about not calling him? You didn't watch Seinfeld? Okay, there are these tropes. Maybe this is an American trope, but in the United States, it's a really like Catholic guilt and like Jewish guilt are like these things, right? And we make actually a lot of jokes about it. But it's the idea that, and this isn't true of Catholicism and Judaism, but it's just sort of like this little joke that the basis of Catholicism and Judaism is that people are depraved, right? Actually, depraved is a language like evangelical churches will use. That people are depraved. We sinned, right? We fell, right? In Genesis. You know what I'm talking about? In Genesis, where like Eve ate the apple and ruined the whole world. You know what I'm talking about? Well, not the apple, but the forbidden fruit, right? Right. Women, we ruin the world, right? That as a people, the human race is guilty. We're sinful, right? And that we should strive towards selflessness through the grace of God. Can someone describe what selflessness is? Okay, there's a clue right here. Okay, you want to take a shot? You did a great job with selfishness. You want to say what selflessness is?
We care more about others than ourselves.
Great. Good. Good. Gold star for you. Right. So a lot of times in religion, right, religion is trying to teach you that you are born selfish, there's something wrong with you, and through God and lessons from the Bible if you're a Christian, or through observing the law if you're Jewish, right, you can achieve selflessness. You're aimed at selflessness. You're aimed at caring for others, okay? This is kind of an oversimplified version of one of the purposes of religion, right? Morality. You are bad, religion is teaching you how to be good. You are bad, religion is teaching you how to be good, right? Actually, in organizing, we kind of tear this apart a little bit and say that actually we're not trying to go from bad to good. This is a false dichotomy. And instead, there's a spectrum here. And there's something really important in the middle. And that's called self-interest. And this is the whole principle that community organizing is based on. Self-interest.
Can you really mention about the existence of selflessness?
Selflessness again? In what?
Can you mention about the existence of selflessness in the world today?
In the world today?
Yeah.
Yeah, so an example of selflessness is like, you'll see like monks who give up everything and their whole life is helping other people, right? Like when I think selflessness, I think Mother Teresa. Not that she's a bad role model, she's a good role model, but the notion of selflessness is that you suppress yourself so much in the adoration of others, in the care of others, right? What self-interest is, and this is a big piece of organizing, and this is a big thing that religious people, when they do organizing, sometimes have a hard time with, even though I'm about to argue using scripture that this is actually integral to religion. Self-interest is taking it into account how you care for yourself, right? Not that you only care for yourself, not that you only care about others, that you have a balanced notion of caring about yourself and others equally, right? This is really healthy. This is moderation, right? So it's not giving yourself up for others, and it's not giving others up only for yourself, but understanding that we always we don't live in a vacuum, we live in a world of connections, and that we need to balance our own self-care in order to be caring to other people, right? You can't give money away to poor people if you have no money for yourself, right? Actually, pastors are really bad at this. You can't be a good pastor if you're always caring for other people because you will get burnt out. In the United States, there's like a really high incidence of pastors getting divorced, pastors being overweight, pastors being unhealthy, pastors having mental health issues because they're not doing self-interest, they're doing selflessness, right? All right, so self-interest is what is important to you in relation to other people. And I talked about it at the beginning of my lecture, the definition of community organizing, right, is collecting people with shared values. What we really mean is collecting people who have a shared self-interest, right? So in this story of JCPenney's, I told you about how we collected the workers and the churches together, right, to work with the workers to get better employment rights. What was the self-interest of the workers in the campaign? Why did they work on the campaign? This is obvious. What was their own self-interest? To have work, right. The workers worked on the campaign so that they could have work. Why did the churches work on the campaign?
Morality.
What was their self-interest?
Morality.
Morality is part of it, right? So if a church has no sense of morality, they look like a pretty bad church, right? If the church says the workers' problem is not my problem, that's a pretty bad church, right? They don't have much standing in morality. What else do you think was driving churches to get behind the workers? Why did they care? Why did 450 people sign letters?
I hope that they can improve their power of, I don't know, on politics maybe.
Good. Yeah. Good. They could build their power. That's very good. That's very advanced thinking. Very good. What else? There's one more thing I'm kind of looking for. Why would a group of people in the community care about workers in the community? Okay, you're a community, and these 3 rows don't have a job. They don't have any work. Why do the rest of you care that they don't work? Why would you care if these 3 rows don't work or don't have any work?
Maybe they would work something for us. And if they don't do their job, maybe we won't get something.
You won't get something? Right. Yeah, that's good.
Maybe that 400 people also wanted to go to JCPenney's.
Thank you. Exactly. They want to go to JCPenney's and have good customer service. Also, if these 3 rows of people don't have work and the rest of y'all have work, what happens in the community?
Break down the order.
What?
Breaking down the order.
It breaks down order.
They start to steal our communist workers and everything.
Yeah.
Because they don't have job and money.
They don't have jobs and money, so they're poor. They have to resort to violence or begging, and what does that mean? It means you all lose stuff, right? You lose what you have because they are worse off, right? So you understanding the importance of self-interest? It's not because, so maybe this is a little bit of a cynical perspective of religion, but the churches didn't just get involved because it was the right thing to do. Yes, morality definitely played a role. But more than that, what the churches were forced to do was have a broader sense of community, right? They had to think long term. They had to think strategically. They had to think, I like JCPenney. I want to go back there and I want smiling faces when I go. So I'd like the store to reopen and I'd like the workers to come back. But furthermore, we don't want more poor people in our community, right? Does that make sense? Okay. I want to close and give you some time to ask me a few questions, if you feel like you have questions, with a piece of scripture. Because I told you that this is a very hard concept for people who are religious to get. Because again, most of the time they're taught their whole lives, this is the reality, right? When in religious organizing, we talk about this being reality. But I think it's because sometimes religion gets it wrong. I think religion gets it wrong when we talk about we're supposed to only be thinking of others. I think it's like overcompensation for how bad we think we are. But if we look to Scripture, and particularly if we look to Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 34, and I'm just picking this scripture out because I'm Christian, so this is like this is the vehicle through which I see the world, right? This is like this is the tradition I've picked, right? I think Christ is actually telling us to be sensitive to self-interest. So it begins, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? So what's happening is someone sees Jesus with a crowd of people, and he actually wants to trick Jesus into giving a bad answer, right? He's saying, like, there are 10 commandments, and actually Jews observe 613 commandments. And he's saying, which is the most important, right? So he's putting Jesus in a very tricky spot, trying to make him, look like an asshole, actually. And what does Jesus say? Jesus says, the most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So I'm going to repeat that. He says, love God with all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well said, teachers, the man replied. You are right in saying that God is one, and there is no other but him, to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all the burnt offerings. So that is more important than all the 612 other commandments. When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And from then, no one dared ask him any more questions. So the idea is he won the challenge. It was kind of like a riddle, right? Which of the 613 is the most important? And Jesus was able to sort of sum all the laws up into one, saying ritual is important in religion, but more important than ritual, more important than practice, is the practice of loving God, loving yourself, and loving your neighbor. I think where we get it wrong sometimes, again, this is not right. But what Mark is trying to get us to see through Jesus is that there's actually a triangle of relationships. God is at the top, I am here, and you are here. And it's equal. This is an equilateral triangle because everyone should love God, everyone should love themselves, and everyone should love their neighbor as themselves. If you're only selfless and you only love your neighbor, you're not following the commandment, because the commandment says love your neighbor as you love yourself, which means there's a balance here, right? It doesn't say, love your neighbor, love your neighbor, love your neighbor as you love God. It says love your neighbor as you love yourself. So this arrow goes both ways. So I guess if I were a math professor, I'd say QED, the proof is done. But that's how I wanted to bring it back to religion, to prove to you that, again, you brought up secular organizing, but And it's true secular organizing does this, but I think more than anything, actually, every church is called to do this. That's what Christ is saying is, how can you love yourself, be attentive to your self-interest, and be attentive to others the same way you're attentive to God? Okay. That's the end of my lecture. There are a couple of minutes left. And I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain any comments. Yeah, so in social work in the US, it's a lot of like, if you're in need of something, you go to a social worker and the social worker tells you how to get it or gives it to you, but they don't try and solve the problem of why the person is out of work or why the person is poor. So sometimes what happens is actually a lot of social workers do social work during the day, and then they get involved in organizing campaigns in their free time. Because of the same reason like church people get frustrated with charity all the time, social workers get tired of seeing the same clients constantly, and they think like, I can't keep seeing the same client. They're not actually getting better. You know, their position in society, they're never rising above their poverty. So how can I get involved in finding a cure for a piece of poverty? Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's a need for social workers, certainly, but there's also a need for organizing. That makes sense, in my perspective, and in some social workers' perspectives. Yeah. So we have 13 churches and 12 churches and 1 synagogue in our group. And then we live in like the whitest part of America. Like we're like the only part of America that has like only white people in it. So we have no real Muslim community. There's a Muslim community in the local university, and so we're beginning to organize them. But in other parts of the country where there's faith-based organizing, it's everyone. You know, as long as they think it's valuable for their participants, then they find the shared value of alleviating suffering, and they work together. Suffering within their own religious communities and in the local community. Well, thank you for having me. I hope this was not boring for you. I hope you learned something about what American religion is beginning to look more and more like. So faith-based organizing is something that's growing in the United States. Like I said, churches are kind of dying, and some churches are looking to this model as a way of sort of reviving communities and reviving the reputation of church in community. So this is becoming a more popular model in the United States as well.